Roughly 26 million people live in North Korea, and a United Nations Commission once concluded the abuses there have no parallel in the modern world. Today's story comes from a man who spent nearly 30 years inside the ruling party's own machinery. His job was to judge the loyalty of everyone around him. Then a single photograph forced him to see the system for what it really was. This is his account of giving up everything he had to claim the freedoms most of us never think twice about. Join us in standing up for human rights. Subscribe to hear more stories of freedom. I was born and raised in the Yonggu district of Pyongyang. You've probably seen it on the news. Kim Il-sung Square, the Taedong River, Rungna Island out in the distance. From far away, it looks like a real city. Keep that phrase in mind. From far away. I was born into one of its better-off families. 3 generations of party members going back to my grandfather. My father gave his whole life to the party, and it bought us things. An apartment reserved for officials. Access to the foreign currency stores shops where you paid in dollars. Places ordinary people never even dreamed of walking into. Every holiday, the party sent rations down to us. Rice, oil, sometimes even meat. I grew up thinking that was just how the world worked. I graduated from Kim Il-sung University. Think of it as North Korea's Harvard. And when I finished, they placed me somewhere. Most people spend their whole lives trying to avoid the organization and guidance. Department of the Workers' Party. Let me tell you what that place really is. It's the department that watches the party's own. Day after day, its job is to decide who is loyal and who is not. I sat inside it, a section chief in charge of the documents. In 2025, I was 49 years old. I had a son who just started university, a wife who kept our home. My parents, getting old now, lived in the same complex just steps away. If you'd looked at us, you'd have seen an ordinary, happy family. And for a long time, that's what I believed we were. My days never changed. Up before dawn to read the party paper, into the office to sort files, home at night to eat with my family. Sometimes my boy would hum a revolutionary song he'd picked up at school, and I'd smile. I can't smile at that memory now. But back then, that was my whole life. Every bit of it. The first crack showed after an inspection trip. Officials in my department are sent out to tour the factories and farms in the provinces to make sure orders from above are being followed. That day, I passed through a small village near Hamhung, and I saw the children. They were sitting in an alley off the road, some no older than 3, some maybe 10. It was the dead of winter, and they were huddled there in thin clothes, faces yellow, bellies swollen. If you're old enough to remember the photos of starving children after the Korean War, that is exactly what I was looking at. In my own country, in the year 2025, I looked at them for a moment. Then I forced myself to look away, because I was afraid the senior official beside me would notice. You need to understand something about that place. Just having the wrong look on your face, the face of a man who has seen too much, can get you killed. So I turned to the window and made myself think about anything else. Not our fault, I told myself. It's the Americans. It's the blockade. I'd been fed that answer for nearly 30 years, and it had always been enough. I believed the party. I believed the leader. I did not question the system. Not yet. But that night I couldn't sleep. Those children kept rising up in the dark in front of me, and every time their faces turned into my own son's face when he was small. I pushed it away. In a place like that, you learn to push things away just to survive. I didn't know it then. But that was the beginning of the end for me. It was early spring 2025. The last of winter still hung over the city. Every so often, a special job came down to my department. Top-secret files from above, and someone had to sort and seal them by rank. Only a section chief or higher was allowed to touch them. That day, I sat alone in a small reading room, opening thick envelopes one after another. Then I opened one. Inside was a single black-and-white photograph. I thought it was just something clipped to a report. I leaned in for a closer look, and the breath left my body. The man in that photo was my mentor. I'll call him Mr. Park. Mr. Park was my advisor back at the university. He was the one who recommended me for the organization and guidance department. When life got hard, he was the man I went to, and we'd share a drink and talk it through. 3 days before that moment, I had been sitting across a table from him, eating soybean stew, telling him we should go fishing when the weather turned. He laughed and said, "Sure, sure." I can still hear that laugh. But Mr. Park in that photo was no longer alive. It was a photograph of an execution. I won't describe what I saw. I'll only tell you this: it was not a quiet death, and there was no mercy in it. I sat frozen, that photo in my hands, and I could not move. My hands were shaking, then my arms, then all of me. Everything went white. 3 days. 3 days earlier, he had been laughing across a table from me, and now this, which meant that somewhere in those 3 days, someone came for him and did this. No trial, no word to his family, and I never even knew it was happening. I slid the photo back into the envelope. I picked up the next file as if nothing had happened at all. I had to. In North Korea, simply reacting to what you see can be the thing that kills you. There was a camera watching me from the corner of that room. So I set my jaw and I kept my face perfectly still. I went home that night. My wife had dinner waiting. I couldn't touch it. My son was telling me all about his day and I couldn't hear a single word. I lay awake and stared at the ceiling until morning. And for the first time in my life, I let myself think the thought all the way through. Something is deeply, terribly wrong with this system. And I am part of it. After that photo, I was not the same man. Nothing changed on the outside. I showed up on time. I sorted my files. I ate lunch with my coworkers. But on the inside, I was seeing the whole world for the first time. Then a coworker didn't come in. I told myself he was sick. A week went by. Then a month. He never came back. And no one ever said his name again. It was as if he had never existed. I said nothing. Because in North Korea, asking about a person who has disappeared is the same as asking to disappear yourself. 2 months later, another one was gone. And from that day on, the same question met me every single morning on my way to work. Is today my turn? Will I be the man in the next photograph? It followed me everywhere. It came while I ate. It came in meetings. That photo rising up again and again behind my eyes. Then one evening, my son came home white as a sheet. I asked him what happened. He told me the political instructor at his school had pulled him aside, started asking questions. Who does your father meet with? What does he talk about at home? How has he seemed lately? Now understand, in North Korea, those aren't questions. Those are orders coming down from the Bawibu, our version of the secret police. My heart went straight through the floor. They were already watching me. Or someone tied to Mr. Park's death was trying to drag me down with him. It didn't matter which. The fear was exactly the same. That night, I walked over to my parents' apartment. There they were, 2 old people at their dinner, frail now, in a way I hadn't let myself notice. My mother reached over and spooned more soup into my bowl and told me to eat. I looked at her hands, and something in my chest just closed. A whole lifetime of loyalty in this small apartment was what had earned them. If I went down, what would happen to them? Here is something you need to know about that country. One man's crime punishes 3 generations. They call it Yonjuaja, guilt by association. If they branded me a traitor, my parents, my wife, my son, every one of them could be taken to a camp. The old people say even the Japanese occupation had a system like that. In North Korea, it's still alive today. I didn't say any of it. I finished my soup and I went home. And after that night, I lived inside 2 prisons. The first was the city of Pyongyang. The second was my own mouth. There was no one I could talk to. Not one soul I could trust. Not even my wife. And every day the same truth pressed down harder. I cannot live like this anymore. I believe every person has one moment that finally makes the decision for them. For me, it was my son's eyes. He came home from school, set down his bag, and looked at me. He didn't say a word. He just looked at his father's face for one long second, and then he walked into his room and shut the door. It was the look of a boy who knows, who can feel that his father is in danger, that his home is in danger. The moment I saw that look, I decided, whatever it cost me, my son was not going to live his life on this soil. I moved slowly, quietly over several days. First, I reached out to a broker I'd known for years, and I started asking about the routes out. In 2025, the border was locked down tight. Word was that cameras had multiplied along the Tumen River, that they'd added thermal gear that could see you in the dark. And still people were crossing that river, with their lives in their hands. If you had money, they said, a door would open. So I took out everything I'd saved. Foreign currency, set aside a little at a time across all my years as an official. Every bit of it went to the broker. In that country, money isn't money. Money is the price of a life. I told my wife. The color drained right out of her face. To someone who's spent her whole life inside that system, the word defection is pure terror. She knew better than anyone what would happen to all of us if we were caught. She sat there in silence for a long time, and then she said something I'll never forget. You know, she said. I've known for a long time too. There was nothing left to say after that. Then came the hardest part. My parents. There was no way to bring two frail, elderly people across the Tumen River. Their bodies would never survive it, and having them along would double our chances of being caught. That was the decision that nearly broke me. I couldn't bring myself to say goodbye. So the last time I saw them, I just sat down, ate a meal, and left as if it were any other night. The evening before we ran, I went alone to my father's grave. He passed when I was 22. I crouched down in front of that stone, and I stayed there a long while. I had no words for him. I just sat with him, and then I stood up and I left. On the walk home, I took out my party membership card. That red card I'd kept close to my chest for almost 30 years. I opened a drawer and I slid it quietly to the very back. I was leaving my country to live. Our night came in the late autumn of 2025, right around the first frost. We decided the three of us would travel separately. Disappear all at once and you draw every eye in the country. So I forged travel papers. As an official, slipping out of Pyongyang under the cover of a work trip wasn't hard. My wife and son went ahead to Hamgyong province a few days early, as if they were only visiting her family. We came together again at a farmhouse about an hour from the Tumen River. The broker had it ready. We hid there and we waited 2 days. They were the 2 longest days of my life. Then the broker arrived. He said only one word. Tonight. A little past 11, we moved. The moon was buried behind clouds and the world was black. Not one of us said a word all the way to the water. My son held my hand the whole way. His hand was cold and it was trembling. The river was wider than I'd imagined. In late autumn, they told me, the Tumen barely reaches your knees. But rain had come, and that night the water rose to our waists. It was cold as ice. Every stone under our feet was slick and shifting. We were halfway across when a light began to move upstream. A patrol. The broker hissed one word. Down. We dropped where we stood and sank into the river until the freezing water reached our chins. My son shook against my side. I put my hand on his head and eased him lower, under the surface, and I prayed the only prayer I had. Please, please. The light moved on. It felt like an hour. It was probably 90 seconds. The broker gave the signal and we crossed the rest of the way. The instant my feet found the far bank, my wife collapsed to the ground. I lifted her up. There was no time for tears. We had to run and we ran. We ran without once looking back. I have never run like that in my life, and I pray I never have to again. The first face to greet us on the other side belonged to an old Korean Chinese woman. She lived in the Yanbian region and she'd spent years quietly helping people like us. She took one look at us and without a single word put dry towels in our hands and pulled us into a warm room. She was about my mother's age. Her touch was so gentle that one dry towel almost undid me completely. But relief, it turned out, was a thing that couldn't last. In China, a defector is a criminal. Get caught and they send you straight back. And going back for a former official like me meant death. Not a quiet one. A public one. Being an official actually made it worse. We know too much, so they hunt us harder than anyone. We spent weeks hidden in an empty warehouse in a tiny farming village. We couldn't step outside during daylight. My boy said the boredom was going to drive him mad, and there was nothing I could do about it. That's when it truly hit me. Not speaking one word of Chinese was a wall I couldn't climb. Even going out for a single meal was a risk. And then our money ran out. Almost nothing left. But God sent us someone, a South Korean missionary working quietly in that region. He found us a place to sleep and he made sure we had food. These were people risking everything to help strangers like us. I will carry what they did for us for the rest of my life. People who wanted nothing in return, helping people they'd never met. That was the very first time I understood what a free person's heart looks like. Still, the months in China were nothing but hardship. I'd be washing dishes in the back of a restaurant when a whisper of a police sweep would go around, and I'd drop everything and run out the back door. The fear started wearing my wife down, body and soul. My son should have been in a classroom with kids his own age. Instead, he sat in a locked room. We couldn't go on like that. And after about 6 months of just holding on, I made the call. We had to reach South Korea. There were a few ways to do it, they told me. The most traveled ran down through Southeast Asia. You cross from China into Laos or Thailand, and then you walk into the South Korean embassy and ask for protection. It sounds so simple when you say it out loud. It is a journey you make with your life on the line. We worked our way down to southern China on trains and buses. No papers, no language, and 3 faces that told anyone who looked that we were Korean. We followed the broker at every turn until the day the broker simply went silent. no contact at all. We sat frozen in a rundown inn in the heart of a strange city for 3 days. And those 3 days felt longer than the night we crossed the river. The Laos border was no gift either. We had to cross on foot, over the mountains, 10 hours through the jungle in the thick of summer. My wife gave out partway through, and my son and I took turns carrying her weight between us. The blisters on our feet swelled and split open. Insects swarmed us in the dark, and we kept walking because we knew what stopping meant. I remember the morning we walked into Thailand. The sky was going soft with light, and rice fields opened up all around us, and I swear it looked like the most peaceful place on this earth. I just stopped and looked up at that sky. We're alive, I thought. We actually made it this far. At the South Korean embassy in Bangkok, a staff member came out to meet us. He said hello in Korean, and my legs went out from under me. The same language I'd heard every day of my life, and it had never once sounded so foreign or so beautiful. The tears came before I could stop a single one. While they worked through our case, the photo came up. An official leaned in and asked me gently, "In the organization and guidance department, was there anything you especially remember?" I hesitated. Then I told him, "About Mr. Park, about the photograph." I watched his face change. We agreed I would tell them the rest once I was safely in Seoul. Somewhere over the ocean, staring out the little airplane window at the clouds below, it finally landed on me. I'm really doing this. I'm really leaving. In the early days of 2026, I set my foot on South Korean ground for the very first time. Do you know what struck me first, walking off that plane at Incheon Airport? Not the lights, not the crowds, the smell. The air was warm and it was clean. In North Korea, every building carries this same heavy, musty smell. Coal smoke. Damp. But here, the air just smelled like warm, like a home with the heat on. And I stood there breathing it in and I started to cry. Defectors are taken first to a place called Hanawon. It's a resettlement center outside Seoul where you spend a few months learning how to live in a free country. But before Hanawon came the interview with the NIS, South Korea's National Intelligence Service. For days, I walked them through my escape and through the work I'd done in the North. And there, I told them about Mr. Park's photograph one more time. They wrote it all down. They recorded every word. I told them everything I could still remember. It was the last thing I would ever be able to do for that man. Life at Hanawon was a strange and beautiful thing. The first time I set foot in a grocery store, I just stood there, frozen. The shelves were full packed and my mind couldn't accept that it was real. In North Korea, there are goods but no money, or money but no goods. Here, it was all simply there for the taking. I picked up one bag of snacks and I honestly wondered, am I really allowed to buy this? My boy adjusted before I could blink. From the day they handed him a phone, he could not put it down. That you could look up anything in the world. That you could watch shows from other countries whenever you pleased. That you could say out loud whatever was in your heart. I understood exactly how much of a miracle all of that was to him. Because it was a miracle to me too. But the thing that struck me deepest was the way people looked. South Koreans had this ease to them walking down the street, sitting in a cafe. Eyes that weren't checking over their shoulders. Eyes that weren't afraid of anyone. After a lifetime of always being watched and always knowing it, that ease was almost too much to take in at first. And then it hit me. So this is what freedom is. Not looking behind you. Not reading the face of the person next to you before you speak. I'll be honest with you, though. It wasn't all easy. My accent gave me away, and sometimes people couldn't follow my words, or they'd look at me a beat too long. Even the food tasted different. The kimchi tasted different, not the sharp, cool taste I'd grown up on in Pyongyang. Small things. But small things pile up, and some days I felt like a stranger in a land that was supposed to be my own. And yet we spoke the same language. We carried the same history. And every single day, that was enough to hold on to. There is a corner of my heart now where my parents live all the time. My mother and my father still in the North. I don't even know if they're alive. Word of my escape surely reached them. And after that, I have no way of knowing what became of them. When that thought comes, it settles on my chest like a stone that won't lift. The pain of a family torn apart, I understand it now, all the way to the bone. All those old souls who spent their whole lives aching for the family they lost in the war that is no longer someone else's story to me. It's mine. And I still think about that photograph. I ask myself why it had to end that way for Mr. Park. If he had truly done something wrong, then let there have been a trial. But in that system, there is no such thing. Fall out of favor with one powerful man, and that's the end of you. Quietly. without your family ever being told. I hope that one day his name is written down where it belongs in the record, in the light. Let me tell you what I've learned about freedom, because I know now, in a way I never could before. Freedom is not some grand and distant thing. Freedom is saying what you want to say, going where you want to go, reading the book you want to read. That's it. That's all it is. And you live inside that freedom every single day of your life. It took me 49 years to feel it for the first time, so don't ever let anyone tell you it's small. I hope before I die to see this country whole again. I truly do. I want to walk the alleys of my old Yeonggu neighborhood one more time. I want to sit on the bank of the Taedong River and just watch the water go by. And if my mother and father are still living, I want to hold their hands. Just once more. That day. I'm still waiting for it. Even now,